have the pleasure of welcoming Colin to our Engati Engage interview series today. This is Nishita Goyal with the Engati team, and I'm going to begin with a quick introduction of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code chatbot platform available across 14 channels with 25,000 bots created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. We run the Engati blog and the video channel, which receives more than 300,000 visitors annually, and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now, moving on to our guest today. Colin is recognized by LinkedIn as one of the world's top 150 business influencers. He is the founder and CEO of Beyond Philosophy, who helps organizations unlock growth by discovering customers' hidden, unmet needs that drives value for them. Colin has written 7 best-selling books on customer-driven growth and is the co-host of highly successful Intuitive Customer podcast. He has also been voted twice as Brand Quarterly Readers and on one of the top 50 marketing thought leaders over 50, and has been established as one of the top customer service gurus in the world by a global guru poll. Welcome, Colin. We're thrilled to have you on our channel today.
Thank you very much for having us. Yes, I'm very much looking forward to doing this today.
Great. So I'm going to begin with my first question. I do see that you founded Beyond Philosophy back in the year 2001. What was your idea behind founding it, and did you consider customer experience at that time to be an important parameter too?
Yeah, so back in 2001, hardly anybody was talking about customer experience. I think my first book, Building Great Customer Experiences, was literally one of the first in the world to talk about customer experience. And the reason that I sort of founded it was that I was, prior to setting up Beyond Philosophy, I worked in British Telecom. And my boss said to me one day that he would like me to improve the customer experience, but do it at least cost. And they always throw that bit in at the end. They always want you to do it at least cost. They never say spend as much money as you want. And anyway, the long and short of it is I spent a couple of years putting together a program to improve the experience. And I thought that customer experience was going to be a big topic. So I decided to leave the safety of British Telecom and a regular salary coming in and start Beyond Philosophy, and it's grown ever since then, and I've been lucky that the topic has become very important globally, and therefore written all the books and done all the things that we've done.
Yeah, I think every business or everybody is just talking about customer experience and how to give the best customer service possible, because I think the world is moving towards a customer-centric approach, and I think that's important because in the end it's all about people, I guess.
Yes, no, absolutely. It's so definitely the world's moving there. I think the only caveat I would put on that is that it has to be done to gain business value. Okay, so organizations are not going to improve the customer experience and go into whatever costs are involved in doing that if it doesn't provide a return. So you've got to focus your customer experience program on getting a return. Otherwise, the senior team will end up saying, why are we doing this? There's no point. Yeah, that's the only caveat I would put on it.
That's correct. That totally makes sense. Okay, so moving on to the next question. What do you believe lies in the future of conversational intelligence or bots, and how is it going to change the world of customer service and experience?
So it's an interesting question, and to answer the question, I think I need to give you a bit of background. Okay, so please stop me if I'm boring you, but let me take a couple of steps back first. So having been in the customer experience field for a long time, what you get to understand is that a customer experience, there's a very important word in the sense of the word experience, okay? And as you've just said, it's about sort of that human experience, okay? So when you start to look at a customer experience, you've got to actually break it down. And for us, there's a rational experience, So that's, in other words, that's what the customer does. Okay. There's an emotional experience, which is how the customer feels.
Yeah.
There's a subconscious experience, and the subconscious is interesting. So it's things that the customer is not necessarily aware of. Okay. So subconscious would be, if you think about the fact that you're breathing now, okay, and as I say that you're breathing, you're then suddenly going, oh yes, I've just breathed in and I've just breathed out. Okay, so you're now conscious of it, you're aware of it, but because I've mentioned it, but before you weren't aware of it, and it was in your subconscious. And then there's this psychological area. Okay, so this is the whole behavioral economics area. And these sort of latter two areas are the things that we talk about on our podcast, the intuitive customer. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that there are four aspects of a customer experience that you need to look at. Now, how does that tie into the future conversation and intelligence of chatbots? Well, it absolutely does, because I think that with chatbots that are sort of backed up through AI, that you will be able to understand the patterns of customer behavior better and to be able to respond to them better. So what I mean by that is that if you think about it, what businesses don't do very well at the present moment in time is they don't interpret customer behavior very well. Okay, and customer behavior, human behavior, is complicated. Okay, so customers say they want something, but then do something different. Right. So let me give you an example. Disney know that when they ask customers what they want to eat at a Disney theme park, Disney know that people say they'd like to have an option of a salad.
Yeah.
Disney also know that people don't eat salads at theme parks. They eat hot dogs and hamburgers. Okay. So what a customer says is important, and what really is important and drives value can be different. Okay. The challenge that we have today with current sort of technologies is we don't deploy that to identify the hidden need. Yeah. But I think going forward, the conversational intelligence and chatbots are going to be able to do that, because as long as they're built in that manner. Yeah. Is this making sense?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, humans fail to connect the dots between what customers want and what customers actually need. And I think that's where the bridge will be, that the conversational intelligence will be covering.
Yeah, so if you look at, let me give you another example. We did some work in a hospital system where when in all the feedback that the customers were getting, or the hospital was getting about the patients, all the patient feedback basically said that what patients wanted was more time with the doctor. Okay. Yeah. When we do a special form of research that sort of uncovers this hidden need, right? And what we discovered was it wasn't that the patients wanted to spend more time with the doctor. Is the hidden need was that the patients felt that the doctors didn't listen to them. Okay. Yeah. Now that's very different to spending more time with them. You could double the amount of time that you spend with the doctor, and you still feel that the doctors don't listen to them. Yeah. So what happens at the moment is most organizations miss that. Okay. But the way that I'm looking at AI and looking at the whole sort of integration of all the channels and therefore chatbots are a part of that, is that it gives us the opportunity to suck in data and therefore to predict what that underlying hidden need is. Does that make sense?
Yes, that totally makes sense. Yeah.
I do think there is a challenge though with chatbots, in the sense that the challenge is not to just implement a chatbot in the same way that you would, based upon the same process that the company currently has. So let me give you an example of that. I was on a chatbot the other day, and a couple of interesting things. One is it was asking me, I think it was Amazon actually, and I was on the chatbot, and it was asking me where I was asking it about an order that I put in. The interesting thing was the chatbot came back with the answer really, really quickly. Okay, which made me realize I wasn't talking to a person. I was actually talking to a machine.
Yeah.
And then at some point, the chatbot basically said, virtually, your questions are too complicated. I'm now going to pass you to a human. It didn't say that, but I mean, that's what effectively it was doing. Yeah. And then the human asked me all the questions that the chatbot had asked me. Yeah. So the danger is that what's happened is they've just taken that process that they currently have in the organization and they've replicated it here. I would be advocating that actually the chatbot needs to slow down a bit, because to make it feel more like a human interaction rather than I'm talking to a machine, if that's the outcome that you want. So, bit of a long-winded answer to answer your question.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So it definitely has its own perks, but it definitely has its cons. It's just the way the bots have to be implemented in a smarter way to make it successful in that particular domain. I think that's the baseline out there.
Yes, I mean it depends on the output that you want. It depends on the customer. But again, let me throw something else in that's not common. So if you've got 4 aspects: rational, emotional, subconscious, psychological. One of the key questions for me is, what emotions are you trying to evoke in your customers?
That's okay. Correct.
So what do you want your customer to feel at the end of that interaction? Now, that interaction may be entirely with a chatbot, but still, how do you therefore set it up? What are the words and phrases that you're going to use? Because you're trying to achieve something at the end, which is making the customer feel trust or cared for, or whatever it may be.
That's correct. You need to have that personalization touch even in a bot to make the end customer feel, okay, I'm not just talking to a machine, but somebody who's able to solve my query or provide me with the right service I'm looking for.
Yes, no, absolutely. No, absolutely. And that's good that happens. I think it's, having that end goal in mind. And again, the bit that I would add to what I've just said is the emotions that you're trying to evoke have to be the emotions that drive value. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no point in making the customer feel cared for or appreciated if that doesn't drive value for you. So again, you need to do research to understand what drives value.
Value, yeah. And what are your customers are exactly looking for?
Yes.
That's
yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So I think I'll move on to the next question. How do you believe customer service is going to change after the pandemic? Are there any specific customer service trends that you're looking once all this crisis are over?
Yeah, I think that, so again, to understand this, you've got to understand, so again, those 4 layers: rational, emotional, subconscious, psychological. The psychological effect of the pandemic is somewhat large, okay?
Yeah.
And the realization that actually society is, civilization is actually quite fragile, okay? So one of the key things that's going to happen is happening now is, again, if you look in the psychology of things, is the whole area of habits, okay? Yeah. So human beings, and in fact, we did a podcast on this a couple of weeks ago. Human beings have habits, okay? And the reason that we have habits is to save ourselves time, okay? So, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is you go and brush your teeth. You don't have to think, I'm getting the toothbrush, I'm putting the toothpaste on there, now I have to put it into my mouth, now I'm going to move it up and down. You don't think that, you do it automatically. And so that's sort of that function is being processed in your subconscious. Okay. Now, why do I say this? Well, customers have habits. Okay, and it's great if the habit that they have means that they end up buying your product. Okay. But if they're not, if it's a competitor and they're not buying your product, then how do you break that habit? Okay. So what habits get broken at sort of unusual times. Okay. So if you think about when you go on a vacation, you try new things. If you think about when women are pregnant and give birth, I'm not sure if this happens with you, but certainly in the UK and the States, lots of companies give packages of baby products to the mother. Okay, why? Because they're trying to establish a habit that will then last throughout the time. Okay,
Yeah.
So we have just, with the pandemic, customers have been forced to change their behavior and to start to do new things and to start to even try new products. I mean, we have our groceries delivered, okay? And we ordered some coffee. We normally ordered this one particular style of coffee, and they didn't have any, and therefore they replaced it with another style of coffee. And it turns out we like that one better. Okay, so after the pandemic, we're going to order that coffee. Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make here is that there is so every cloud has a silver lining, and the silver lining in this cloud is that you will be able to start to think about implementing customers will be different, and you'll therefore be able to start to think about how you can get customers, how you can build on the new customer habits, or how you can implement a new customer habit now. But what that's going to require is understanding of how customers are now post-pandemic. Okay, and what are the opportunities areas? In my view, organizations who assume that everything is just going to go back to normal are being very naive. It's not going to go back to normal. There will be, as everyone's saying, there is going to be a new normal, and the issue is what is that new normal, and how is that going to happen? And I think that's what you're going to start to see more of. Clearly, one of the trends will be just more people doing more stuff online, people doing more video, people having more groceries delivered. If I was a grocery delivery service now, I'd be rubbing my hands. I mean, Amazon, massive increase in the sales of Amazon. Not like they needed to sell more stuff, but but people's habits have changed.
That's correct. Yeah, so the world is going to change. The people are going to change because they have seen a different side of themselves adapted to new habits while they are working from home or isolated at one place. But how do you, since you mentioned that businesses who are thinking that it's going to be normal soon are naive. So do you think this is going to be like a 5 years or a 6 years effect, or it's going to be like a temporary or a permanent one if I frame it again?
Well, I'm not a medical expert, obviously, but from what I'm hearing, my guts tell me we're not going to get back to normal until either we've built up an immunity or we're going to have a vaccine. And then we don't even know whether, like the flu vaccine, you have to have a flu vaccine, it changes every year. So I can see this going on personally for the next year, 18 months. and that is going to have, which again sounds bad, and it is bad, but in historical terms, it's a blink of the eye. Yeah, when you think about, when people talk about the Spanish flu pandemic, that lasted 18 months, something like that, 2 years maybe, and it rolls off the tongue. Yeah, it was 18 months, 2 years. We just happen to be living it at the moment. So I think you've got what happens, what's the immediate effect that people are dealing with, but you've then got to start thinking about what's the more long-term effect as well. And I think the organizations that pay attention to more about what that medium term is going to be are going to be the ones that come out of this better. And to do that, you've got to understand customer behavior. You've got to do research to understand customer behavior, and you've got to think about what's that new normal gonna be. And certainly those are the questions that our clients are asking us at the moment, and starting to work on research to figure that out, basically.
So what is that one piece of advice that you're giving to all your clients and customers right now when they're questioning you on this?
The key question for me is, what's the new normal going to be in your industry? And moreover, what do you want it to be? Yeah. And therefore, so, how are you going to position yourself because of that? Okay. Let me tell you this story, because I really think this story is relevant at the moment. I always remember in this sort of, I remember watching a film that was based in the 1960s, and it was of racing car drivers, and these racing car drivers were having a race for the world championships or whatever it was. And there was a guy in first place and the guy in second place, and they were hurtling around the track. And the guy in first place, unfortunately, spun out, okay? I had a really bad accident. And the guy in second place then went on and ran the rest of the race. And he was being interviewed by the press afterwards. And the press turned around to him and said, when you saw the accident, did you slow down? And he said, no. He said, I didn't. He said, I went faster because I knew all of my competitors would slow down. So it's that attitude of, now is the time to push forward, not retrench back. And it's the companies that are pushing forward and are thinking ahead that will come out of it well. And it's the companies that are pulling back that won't. And the distance will be too great for them to get back quickly.
Yeah, you're right. So the customers are right now free exploring more on social media and everything. So companies are taking an advantage of it and trying to focus on social media, getting the brand out, will be the ones who will be shining in this.
Yes. I think it's the ones that are thinking not just about now, but about what the new normal is going to be, how their customers have changed, what can we do to improve things, how do we operate in that new marketplace, how do we create new habits in that new marketplace, and are starting all of that work to answer those questions now, today.
Yes.
And that's what our clients are asking us, and that's what we're working on with more of the progressive clients, let me put it that way.
Yeah, that would require a lot of efforts, and we need to predict what customers are going to ask for. And I think that's the key to success. If we sit and wait right now, it's going to be a difficult time once we start in the market again.
Yes. Well, you can imagine what's going to happen when as things get back to normal, and it's not going to be black or white. It's not going to be, everyone's in lockdown then and suddenly the world opens and everything's fine, because it's not going to happen like that. It's going to be a steady return. Everyone's going to be scrabbling around just to get business in the short term. So again, they're going to be very, very blinkered in their approach. It's the ones that are taking off those blinkers or blinders and looking further afield that I think are going to be the ultimate winners in this.
That's so correct. I think businesses who are watching this should adapt to this advice and start working hard towards making sure that they can create a difference once, or can create a difference in the normal new which will going to come up.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I would say is, I'm not saying don't worry about the short term. You can do both. You can go, right, this group of people over here are going to worry about the short term, but we're going to take out this group of people and they're going to be thinking more strategically about the medium and the long term. And we're going to do some research. And again, this is what we're doing with some more progressive clients. We're going to do some research. We're going to start doing some experiments. And when those start working, we can then turn around and go, okay, look, we can prove that this new normal works. Now let's implement it across the piece. So, yeah.
Okay, so I'll move on to my next question. I think we spoke about where customer service is going to be after the pandemic, what customer experience was in 2001. Just a quick question on, do you think we have reached the stage where customer service is given the importance that it actually deserves? And if not, how do you think that we can approach to create a customer-centric work culture?
Yeah, so when I used to work at British Telecom, I used to run all the call centres. So I used to have 3,500 people in call centres around the world, and therefore was in customer service. And customer service has always been treated as second-class citizens. And if I'm totally honest with myself, I don't think that's going to change. The reality is that the more glamorous areas are the areas like sales and marketing, because they're the ones that are seen to be pulling in the revenue. Okay. And therefore, and the danger is that customer service are seen to be more of a cost than anything else. So I don't think it's necessarily about making it more important. I think that. So what do I mean? I think the more progressive organisations, again, the ones that do well, people like Apple. I'm a great fan of Apple's. Recognise the importance of customer service and give them equal status. So it's not about who's first and who's second and who's third. It's about going, everybody's equal. Okay, and therefore, how do you create a customer-centric culture? Well, again, big subject, and that was the subject of my second book, Revolutionize Your Customer Experience. One of the first things you've got to do is you've got to understand where you are today. Okay, and what we discovered was that there were 4 stages of customer centricity. There is naive organizations. So naive organizations are a bit like the used car salesman. You buy a car from them, you drive off the parking lot, the engine falls out, you take it back and they say tough luck. Yeah. They couldn't care less about the customer. You have transactional organizations. So transactional organizations are the majority of organizations. They treat customers as a transaction. They process them. They treat the customers as if they are part of a production line. You then got enlightened organizations. Enlightened organizations are ones that recognize that there's a more holistic experience. And then you've got natural organizations. A natural organization is an organization who is naturally focused around the customer. So the first question to work out how you create a customer-centric culture is going, well, where are we today? Are we naive? Are we transactional? Are we enlightened or natural? And therefore, what do we need to do about it? Okay, and then there's obviously been a lot of discussion about employee engagement. So employee engagement, recruiting the right type of people, putting in place the right type of measures that drives the right behavior, thinking about the culture of the organization, thinking about the processes that happen. How well do people understand customer expectations? How well are the systems designed around the customer? Are the systems designed to meet a customer need, or are the systems there for cost savings for the organization? So I have to say, I can pretty much go into any organization, and within a couple of hours of asking questions, I can typically find out where they are. And what I mean by that is how customer centric there are, because there are some really just key points that you start to realize how customer centric an organization is. And we do a customer centricity assessment on organizations against these 9 areas. And it's quite surprising how so many organizations are still at that transactional stage.
Yeah, that sounds interesting, a customer centricity assessment. So if you can elaborate more on that, what would be the more key points that you take into consideration? Is there a practical approach that you have towards it? I think the viewers would love to know more about that.
Sure. So you've got naive, transactional, enlightened, and natural organizations.
Yeah.
And within those organizations, there are 9 areas that affect the experience. So, and I've said some of them: people, systems, processes, culture, expectations, how people go to the channel, measurement. I've probably forgotten a couple. But so you can be, so let me give you an example. How much time do senior managers spend talking to customers? Okay. Naive organizations, senior managers won't spend any time talking to customers. Natural organizations, yeah, senior managers will spend quite a bit of time talking to customers. Think about the processes. How are your processes developed? Okay, are your processes developed for the good of yourself, your organization, or are the processes developed for the good of the company, for the good of the customer as well? Okay, think about expectations. How well do you understand customers' expectations? Do you understand? And so typically, customers would, organizations would know how quickly the customers want things delivered. They would know typically what's the price range they would deal with, etc. So they know these rational. Go back to that those 4 bits. They understand the rational part. But how do you understand customers' emotional expectations? Yeah. Think about, you talk about customer service training. So let me give you another typical example. I walked into a training camp, into a client a few weeks ago, and I said to them, we were big contact center there, and I said to them, well, how much training do you give new people? And they said, we gave them 6 weeks of training. Okay, great. How much training do you give them on how to deal with customers? You know, when you're on the phone, how much training do you give them? We give them half a day. So out of a 6-week training course, they give them half a day. Yeah. So that tells me they're not really serious. Yeah. And then you look at the quality measures that they have. Okay. And all the quality measures are around the rational things. There's nowhere that says, did the agent feel that the person, or did the agent make the customer feel that they cared for them? Did the agent appreciate them? Okay, you know, because that's a different mindset, right? So the biggest thing I've learned since doing this since 2001 has been customer experience is about a mindset. Okay, most organizations still look at a customer as something, as a transaction, something that they're to get something out. out of. They don't look at them as a human being, and they don't still think about. So go back to my question of earlier: what emotions are you trying to evoke, and do they drive value? And let's assume now for a moment that you know that. Let's assume now that you know that if you make a customer feel cared for, that will drive value for you. And let me be clear, most organizations don't know that, right? But let's assume that we did. Now what would you do? Now you would start to train your customers, train the agents on how to make the customer feel that way, okay? And now what you would also do is measure things like, does the customer feel cared for in the surveys that they have? And now let me challenge the audience watching this. Do you know really, what the emotions are that drive value? Do you train your people on how to particularly evoke feeling cared for? And do you measure those things? And those are all the things that we do with our clients. So when we go into an organization, we define what drives value. We define what emotions are you trying to evoke, and then we put in training courses to get the agents and people like that to make the customer feel cared for, and we put in place measurements to do that. Why do we do that? Because that's all about moving the mindset to a new mindset and making that whole organization through that approach be more customer-centric. Does that make sense?
Totally. I think organizations should actually look at defining the customer-centric approach in a more as to what my customers are actually looking for, and not in terms of. So I think this would be a good piece of advice for everyone out there who thinks, okay, yeah, we are customer-centric, we do follow that approach, but this would be a reality check for them.
Good.
Okay, so I think I just have one last question. So is there any other sound bites or any other insights that you want to leave my viewers with?
I think what I would look back on is just to repeat a couple of things that I've said that I think are really, really, really important, okay? Customers are people, and it's a huge shock, okay? But customers are people. And you have to understand that human decision making is complicated. Okay. Therefore, think of what customers are doing. Think of the fact that customers have emotions, and therefore, what emotions are you trying to evoke? Think of the subconscious things that you do, the subconscious messages. Let me give you an example of this, because I think this is really important. We did some work in a contact center, and this was for an insurance company in the UK. And what was happening was that when people were phoning into this insurance company and they were placing an order for an insurance policy, at the end of it, the agent was turning around and saying, your policy documents should be with you within 5 working days. Okay. And what was happening was 76% of customers that were having that experience were then phoning back after about 3 days and saying, where's my policy document? Okay. Now, this was the largest insurance company in the UK, so I'm talking millions of phone calls. Okay. And when we analysed it, what we discovered was that the agents were saying one word that was really causing the problem. The agents were saying, your policy documents should be with you within 5 working days. That was a subconscious message that they may not be there. And that was causing customers to phone back in. Okay. And we've got the video on our website of the customer explaining this, our client explaining this. We changed one word. We changed, your policy documents will be with you within 5 working days. And literally within 3 weeks, the call volumes declined from 76% calls back to 6% calls back. Okay, that saved millions of pounds. Okay, and that is a classic example of a subconscious, hidden. If you turn around to the customer and said, why, and we obviously interviewed customers, but if you said to the customer, why did you call back? They didn't say, they said should. If they hadn't have said should, I wouldn't have phoned back. They didn't say that. What they said was, I just felt that, that there was a problem, and I wasn't really certain, so I decided to phone back. Okay, so that's a classic example of a subconscious experience that is a hidden experience, and identifying those things, embracing this behavioral economics. Okay, so behavioral economics is about how people behave and the effect upon money. It is the real insights to things, and these are the things that we talk about on our podcast, The Intuitive Customer. It's getting under the skin of customer behavior. So for me, the key soundbite is, customers are human beings. Customers are actually irrational. Human beings are irrational. We do irrational things. And if you think that customers buy logically, you are mistaken. Customers buy emotionally and then justify with logic.
That's okay. Yeah.
So, in anything, we have, in all the research we've ever done, we have never ever found that price is the number one issue. And yet there are still too many organizations that think that price is the key issue, and it's not. Yeah, it's more of these human subconscious things that are the key issue.
Yeah, so if you definitely make a customer feel important, you give them the right messaging, you give them the right solutions. Even if you have a costly or an expensive solution, I would rather say customers wouldn't think buying it, because they know, okay, I'm getting some value out of it. This particular product is going to give me the value, and I have somebody whom I can run into because there is an assurance which I derive from it. So they of course look for an assurance, and that has to be given in a right manner. And a beautiful example of what you explained here, how you just twisted one word from should to will, and that just saved a lot of resources out there, and it gave a more compassionate way of looking at, making the customers feel special and moving towards it. I think that was an amazing piece of advice, and I really hope I'm able to follow a few of them and at least apply at least one of them, and I'm sure we would be able to do wonders from here.
Great, good. Well, thank you very much for having us on. It's been very, very good, most enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colin. It was an amazing interview, and I really loved your insights, and I'm sure my audience is going to love this, and we're going to start implementing this so that it really helps us boost our businesses too.
Good. Great.
Thank you so much. It was a lovely interview. Thank you so much. Have a great day ahead and stay safe there. Bye-bye.
Okay. See ya.